Morena, good morning, Bryony and Mike. How are you both?
Kia ora. Hi, Anna. Amazing. Thank you.
Where are you joining us from this morning?
So I'm over in Cromwell in the beautiful central Otago of New Zealand on my cherry farm here. And Bri, you're Te Whanganui Atara, aren't you?
I am, on a beautiful sunny day, which we haven't had a lot at. So it's put me in an incredibly good mood.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for joining us this morning. So today we're going to be speaking about Rewiring Aotearoa, and we have both members of Rewiring joining us this morning to just talk about some funding that they received from the Funders Commitment for Climate Action, which we'll speak to later. And I'll hand over to you, Mike, to maybe just give us a little bit of an overview of what it is that Rewiring does and why we're here this morning to learn more about it.
Ka pai, tēnā koutou katoa e te whānau. I am going to share, I have prepared a little presentation on rewiring and everything that we are going to be doing with the amazing support that we've had from the Kaupapa of National Significance. Esther, I'm just going to confirm you can see the slides now.
Yes, we can see it. Great stuff.
Fantastic. So Rewiring Aotearoa is a charity organisation whose sole purpose really is whakahiko te ao, and that is to electrify everything in our beautiful country, Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm just going to run through very, very quickly the whakapapa on how our entity formed. Essentially, this chap here is an Australian. His name is Dr. Saul Griffith. He was very instrumental in helping the Biden administration in America write the Inflation Reduction Act and founded an organization called Rewiring America. He then moved back to Australia, his homeland, Wollongong in New South Wales, and he founded and started the organisation Rewiring Australia. And Rewiring Australia in particular is become a bit of a sister organisation of what we've done. He came over to a conference in Glenorchy, quite close to where you are, Esther, called Toru, where he presented on the work that he'd done creating Rewiring America and Rewiring Australia. And he convinced quite a number of really awesome New Zealanders to look at starting Rewiring Aotearoa, which was the New Zealand specific version of this kaupapa, around just electrifying everything and empowering individuals in New Zealand to take climate action into their own hands in really significant ways. They were looking for a CEO. And ultimately, I was this electric cherry farmer from central Otago jumping up and down about the merits of electrification, what I'd done on my farm and all of this kind of stuff. And I was looking for a new way of expanding on the electrification kaupapa. And ultimately, they invited me after some talk to become the CEO of Rewiring Aotearoa, which was really awesome because it has given me this clear purpose, this clear North Star on what we need to look at achieving. And yeah, we've just grown it massively from there. Our story is really simple. Saul gave it, and Rewiring America gave us a very small amount of seed capital, about 150,000 New Zealand dollars, which funded me and 3 other people at the time to basically help put this report together called Electric Homes. And Electric Homes was really sort of about demonstrating the huge amount of savings potential available to the households of New Zealand when we get gas out of the homes, when we electrify our vehicles, and when we put solar and batteries in. And that was something that we released in March 2024, and just really was the thing that launched our charity organisation as being a bit of a thought leader in the space, which is really exciting. Fast forward, once we released that paper, we ended up attracting a large amount of philanthropy from Sir Stephen Tindall, Urs Herzl, who's one of our primary, or probably our lead funder, who now lives in Takapuna, but was the 8th employee at Google, and also the Whakatupu Foundation, which many of you would have heard of as well. So in particular, Carl Vink's been very, very supportive of what we were doing. And that gave us enough money to basically expand our team now to quite a massive organization. I think we're 13 FTEs, filled by about 18 different people, climate scientists, data scientists, energy experts, crazy cherry farmers like me. You know, there's a whole bunch of people in here that are really, really dedicated to telling the whakahiko te ao story, the kōrero, to the whole of New Zealand, to make New Zealand realize just how much we are leaving on the table by delaying this energy transition. Our goal is to build the cheapest and most renewable energy system in the world, and this is the gag that everybody loves. We're going to do that by focusing on the low-hanging cherries. One of the things that we did recently is we counted the number of machines that were required to electrify our entire nation. And in total, there are 10 million fossil fuel machines in New Zealand, and we can split them into three key categories. 700,000 machines that are just simply not ready to electrify yet. There might be a demo or demonstration somewhere in the world, but it's really, really expensive and uncommercial to look at electrifying, or it might not be possible to electrify. We have 1 million machines that are almost ready. That means if you have an electrification hero in New Zealand, that machine may exist in New Zealand already, but it's something that requires an awful lot of effort to do. And there's 8.5 million machines in New Zealand that are ready to electrify right now, where we will save a bucket ton of money by electrifying them. So this is what rewiring is all about, breaking down climate into a machine problem and then going after the fossil fuel machines and making them electric. So just over 80% of global emissions are fossil fuel energy related emissions. And so we see this as the big opportunity on the horizon, not only for rapidly reducing emissions this decade, but also saving whānau in New Zealand a huge amount of money in the process. So it's about going after the things that are actually in our individual wallet's best interests, our community's best interests, and our nation's best interests, that almost has the byproduct of also really smashing emissions out of the park. 700,000 machines that are not ready to electrify. We've counted them all. We know exactly what they are. They're the big machines. We have 64 hot air balloons in New Zealand, for example. There is no electric hot air balloons anywhere in the world. That's why hot air balloons exist in the red category. And it's also, hot air balloons are not a reason not to look at electrifying all the machines that can. So a lot of the time people talk about, well, what are we going to do about airliners? Or what are we going to do about my large 250 horsepower tractor? Electrification isn't an option. So I like to use the hot air balloon metaphor as kind of an example of just how crazy that resistance can be. We've then got 1 million machines that are ready to electrify, almost ready to electrify, and there's plenty of examples of these existing in New Zealand now, like Auckland Transport that has the largest electric bus fleet in the Southern Hemisphere, or Waste Management up in Auckland that now has 54 electric dump trucks that they electrified themselves. My Electric Tractor is another example, the brilliant work that's been done in the electric boating or maritime space. And also all of these utes in New Zealand and rural New Zealand that are about ready to electrify. In fact, we have just seen a complete four-wheel drive, fully electric ute in the country now. So this is all the stuff that's almost ready to go, which is super exciting. And those utes are about to become part of the 8.5 million machines that are ready to electrify right now. And the thing about these 8.5 million machines is the large majority of them exist in the homes of New Zealand, which is why we are really big on focusing on the whare, or the households of New Zealand, and what the houses of New Zealand can do to ultimately save a lot of money by basically leaning into this energy transition. New Zealand's energy system isn't actually very renewable at all. We've spent a lot of time patting ourselves on the back about how renewable our electricity system is. But when you actually look at overall energy consumption in New Zealand, well over 3/4 of it is still fossil fuels. So we have to go on the same transition that every other country in the world has to go on. But one of the big advantages of New Zealand is because our fossil fuel prices are so expensive, we are actually probably the first country in the world that has hit what we call this economic tipping point, where it is now cheaper. Well, basically, you are never better off financially buying a fossil fuel machine in New Zealand again, and that's something that we have to start promoting out to our iwi, right? To absolutely everybody in New Zealand, that this is the wise course of action moving forward. So collectively, New Zealanders, that's you and me, Esther, and all of our fellow compatriots, spend $55 million a day on fossil fuels. That $55 million a day is largely on imported fuel stocks from overseas, which means not only does that money leave our wallets and leave our communities, but the majority of this money actually evaporates out of New Zealand's economy. And so this is a really strong economic argument that we shouldn't be running on molecules that we source from overseas, and instead we need to figure out how to run on New Zealand homegrown energy. And in particular, we are very, very good at creating electricity. So $55 million a day collectively across our farms, our businesses, and our homes. And what we want New Zealanders to do is make 6 good decisions over the next 15 years. So in the next 15 years, the 6 machines that exist in your home are going to need to be like replaced or installed again. So that is the way we cook our food, the way we heat our hot water, the way we heat our rooms, the way we transport ourselves around this beautiful country of ours. So we're talking electric vehicles and e-bikes and all those kinds of things. And the 2 new appliances that are going to be coming to every home in New Zealand, which is solar on the roof and batteries in the garage. And I'll go into more details as to why that is at the moment. We have about 2 million households in New Zealand. And if we were to electrify all of them, put some solar on the roof and a battery in the garage, just the households of New Zealand alone will save $29 million a day. That is such a ridiculous amount of money. Just those 6 quick, there's 6 easy decisions for every home over the next 15 years will result in about $100 billion worth of savings by 2040. No one can contextualize how much money that is, so we've tried to make it a bit easier. What this shows you is that we could not build Dunedin hospitals fast enough to keep up with the savings available to the households of New Zealand if we look at electrifying. We certainly couldn't build rugby stadiums fast enough. And it also shows you, I think, just how expensive other infrastructure can be, like Queenstown roundabouts, Esther, there's just so much savings available, just for the households of New Zealand. This is not money that goes to the government or treasury. This is money that stays in New Zealanders' wallets, which is what I think makes this kaupapa so special and so important. To run through the numbers really, really quickly, there's 8,500 diesel heaters we need to replace in New Zealand. There's 307,000 gas space heaters that we need to replace in New Zealand. And if you look at the lifetime costs of all of the heating options for our whare, for our households, you can see that potentially many New Zealanders will save, in the vicinity of $10,000 to $15,000 by upgrading their LPG heating to, say, to heat pump heating, as an example. And, we've got 580,000 gas water heaters. Many of them are on our homes in Cromwell and Queenstown, Esther, all over New Zealand, though. And when you look at those, again, the lifetime savings opportunity, we're looking at, the vicinity of $7,000 if we look at figuring out how to get people off LPG and onto heat pumps, or even better, heat pump hot water powered by a solar system. And so this is what we mean, is that we're not asking everybody to go and replace everything immediately. What we're doing is the next time your gas hot water system breaks, we want everyone in New Zealand to know that it is an absolute, it's just financial, it's a really bad financial decision to look at replacing like for like with another gas system. What we need to be doing is looking at making sure they know to replace this with a heat pump hot water system. In the case of LPG in the South Island of New Zealand, it is so expensive that in actual fact, you are better off now extending a mortgage, financing a new hot water heat pump at 5.5% than even if you installed a gas calefont in your home yesterday. That is how remarkable the economic opportunity is for New Zealand, and not enough New Zealanders currently know about this. 360,000 gas stovetops. We don't use a lot of energy for cooking, but what gas does is cause us major health issues. A recent study put out by ECA suggested about 200 premature deaths in New Zealand and 3,000 childhood asthma cases per year as a direct result of combusting gas in the home. And of course, in particular, this massively affects our low-income whānau, which I'm going to get into in more detail in a moment. This is something that we have to look at doing. It's about $3.3 billion in lost productivity and health costs, which means it's costing New Zealand $9,000 per stove, which is just such a ridiculous amount of money and such an avoidable thing that we can now look at doing. And so this is one of the big things that Rewiring is also focusing on, is how can we improve the economics and the health outcomes of New Zealand by getting gas out of our kitchens, and also those open flame gas heating systems. And to be honest, we tell a really positive story about all of these machines. Electric machines are just generally better. If anyone's ever had one of those gas stove cooktops, they suck to clean. And when you upgrade to induction, it is a single wipe down. So far better. In total, these 8.5 million machines that largely exist in the homes of New Zealand account for about 25% of New Zealand's gross emissions. So it's important to understand rewiring is not a complete climate solution, we are going after the low-hanging cherries of New Zealand's emissions inventory, which is all the machines that can be replaced with today's technology, or very, very soon with today's technology, that also will have an economic outcome for doing so. So the stuff that doesn't matter if you're left wing or right wing, whether you care about climate or care about something else, whether, everybody wins by replacing those machines. So it's about telling a really positive story where we no longer have to fight, those horrible, awkward family barbecue situations with your crazy uncle is not something that we have to worry about anymore, because your crazy uncle also wins in this scenario. And just to give you an example of, from a emissions perspective, of just how substantial this is, if you buy a gas cooktop, brand new, we expect it to last for about 15 years. The emissions from that gas cooktop is the equivalent of 6 return flights between Auckland and Queenstown. By the time you get down to buying an electric vehicle over a petrol car, that's 107 return flights between Auckland and Queenstown. So what we do here is we call this a concept called committed emissions, which is you can't just swap the fuels that go into this machine. If you buy a gas hot water heater, you will have that gas hot water heater more than likely until it dies. That's committing to 15 years, one decision committing to 15 years of emissions, which is the equivalent of 20 return flights. And so this is what we really think is really powerful, is making sure that every machine purchase moving forward is electric, and that can do wonders for our economy and wonders for our emissions reductions. This is a slide I borrowed from one of our teammates, so it's kind of him quoting me, not me quoting myself. But the other part of this story is that rooftop solar is now the cheapest form of energy to New Zealanders. And I'm going to go into a bit of detail really quickly on this front as well, but this energy transition is not just about moving fossil fuels to electricity. It is also about moving electricity from centralized generation to giving New Zealanders more energy sovereignty and far greater resilience by allowing them to generate and store a lot of energy that they consume within their own whare. So it's really important to understand New Zealand's electricity system. Your power bill, you're probably paying 35 cents a kilowatt hour in a home in New Zealand on average now. About half of that is generation at our large power plants, and the other half of that is all the other stuff, the poles and wires that connect our homes to those power plants. And that's what has been increasing massively in price, and what's causing a lot of people's power bills to go up really recently has been all of that additional infrastructure investment that needs to happen as part of the electrification process. And if we break it down even further, this is where I think that there is a huge opportunity on the table for New Zealanders. So about 19 cents to generate our large power plants, 3 cents for transmission, 13 cents for distribution, 5 cents for retail and metering, and the New Zealanders are paying roughly 30 cents a kilowatt hour and about $2.50 a day, which works out to be about 35 cents a kilowatt hour in total. If you finance rooftop solar on your mortgage at 5.5%, it is 13 cents a kilowatt hour. And that just shows there's just a massive shift in energy affordability. And it comes down to now the technology that we use. Another way of looking at this is, even if generation was free, even if aliens came to New Zealand and gave us a free fusion power plant in the middle of the North Island of New Zealand and said free power for everyone, it would still not get to the households of New Zealand cheaper than solar financed on their own rooftop. And that is just a remarkable thing that we have to be considering when we're looking at how do we lower the power bills for everyone in New Zealand. Super quickly, this is grid electricity, both with fixed costs and without fixed costs. This is what's happened very, very recently with solar financed on a mortgage at 5.5%. And if you include a battery in the mix as well, we are now at a point where solar and batteries financed is cheaper than grid electricity. And so when you think about it, like with all forms of energy, whether it's gas or petrol or electricity through your power bill, you are paying it's like a monthly outgoing, or in the case of petrol, probably a weekly outgoing, where you are constantly spending money to an energy landlord. And what we're trying to encourage New Zealanders to do is look at, well, what happens if you finance solar on your rooftop? That ends up being far cheaper than a power bill to do so. So yes, you go into you go into debt, I guess, to get these solar panels on your rooftop, but ultimately it ends up being far, far cheaper than continuing to pay your power bill to Mercury or Meridian or whoever it might be. And this continues to get cheaper, and the gap continues to widen. So while electricity prices are forecast to continue to go up at quite a steep rate, the technology available to the customers of New Zealand keeps getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so what we've been doing is really, and this is where the Kaupapa of National Significance is really helping Rewiring out, is about accelerating the localized electrification that we're doing by really seeding our electric communities. We now have 31 communities around the country. And I want to acknowledge right here at this point, the people that are involved in these communities are middle-class New Zealanders. And I'll get to the bit about low-income New Zealanders and what we're trying to do in that space at the moment. But I see two key work streams for New Zealand. One is activating the middle class to build the industry required for this energy transition to occur. And that means anyone who can afford the finance needs to be doing this stuff now. And at the same time, Rewiring needs to focus very heavily on what we do to ensure a TICA transition moving forward. But we're very proud of our 31. We actually now have 32, Esther, because I have just convinced a lady in Cromwell to start Electrify Cromwell, which is my hometown, which is really exciting. And these community groups are doing things in so many different ways to help accelerate electrification in their local rohi. We've got Electrify Queenstown, obviously running some pretty massive community events, which is really exciting. We have people that are creating case studies all over New Zealand of just how much money they're saving. And we're seeing people saving, including the cost of finance and capital and interest repayments, like excluded from that. Once all that's been taken care of, we're still seeing people saving thousands of dollars a year. So it is a remarkable opportunity for our households. In the hut recently, these are all volunteer groups that we have helped supported with a little bit of grant funding or help towards getting their collateral together and just helping to the volunteer groups to arrange these things and figure out how this could work. In the hut recently, they ran, I think they had 1,300 people through just an exhibition at their town hall, which was very, very highly regarded by council as well as all the exhibitors there, where people were coming ready to learn about electrifying their whares. When Waiheke, we're helping people create a community fund to help building solar on low-income houses over there, which is really exciting. In the Hauraki, we have an EV community has got together to do EV car sharing, so allowing more and more people to access EVs. Up in Te Tai Tokoro, we have market stalls every farmer's market, and also lots of town hall events that are going on. This is one of our more mature, well-developed community groups that is just absolutely flying. And you can see the branding and the collateral there. That's all stuff that we've been able to develop with the help of the Kaupapa of National Significance to allow these people to go out and help benefit their communities. In Wanaka, we have electric drinks I think it's every second Thursday, which is a lot of fun because powers and pints, nothing beats talking about electrification like enjoying a pint at one of the local breweries there. In Kapiti, they've done things completely different. They're more introverted. They prefer to go into people's homes who ask and sit down with them and do proper home energy audits. That is not just about insulation, but is all about electrifying the machines and then also looking at whether solar and batteries are relevant. Christian, who runs Electrify Kapiti, I have to commend him personally because I spent years trying to convince my in-laws to get gas out of their homes and get solar panels on their roof. And then he goes in and within half an hour, they've done both of those things. So he's electrified my in-laws, which is super cool. In Queenstown, we've also got vehicle to grid trials going on. I think there's a lot of energy nerds in Queenstown in particular that are really looking at how it is that we can accelerate some of the technology for whānau, not only in Queenstown, but around New Zealand. In Taranaki, I'm heading there next week, which I'm very, very excited about. I've got 2 presentations on. But also a lot of fully electric homes in the community have opened up their homes for this tour where people can ride bikes and drive their electric vehicles around to all these different homes and come and hear from real New Zealanders and their community and their neighbours just about how effective some of these upgrades have been and how much money that they're saving. And then we get on to this bit. So again, this is all middle-class New Zealand, really trying to help activate middle-class New Zealand. But all of the people that are in our community groups and us as well, we're very, very conscious of how it is. This is such an economic slam dunk for everyone. But how do we make sure this is a TICA transition that obviously it's not just those that can afford to save are saving, but making sure everyone can afford to save. We're doing a lot of work at the moment around a new report that's coming out very soon around electrifying marae. which is really exciting because that is one of the ways that we think that we can provide whānau with cheap electric vehicle charging. It's one of the ways that we can provide the whole community with cheaper energy bills as well, and also a massive amount of resilience when we see things like Cyclone Gabrielle come through, or what we saw in Southland, that the marae becomes a place where people can seek refuge during those difficult times. And we have been engaging with iwi and hapu across the country to figure out how it is that we can not only do this at marae level, but also maybe down to individual whare level as well. So how we can activate iwi funds potentially to do this in a way that provides whānau with maybe cheaper financing or safer financing to be able to do this stuff on their own homes. And we have a really awesome steering ropu of Māori from around New Zealand that are dedicated to making this happen. And two people that the Kaupapa of National Significance, or three people, have really helped rewiring. On the bottom right there, we have Jay and Mike Riwi from Rewiring. Mike is our Māori and Pacifica kind of lead. We have Jay, who's our ecosystems lead, and over there on the far left is the newest member of our team, Matt, and Matt has come in to really make sure that we activate and drive and push forward the relationships that we have, in particular with our iwi, and actually getting real world tangible results on the ground for our Māori communities. And this was going to be launched very, very soon, which is something that we're super excited about. But then we've also got our low-income whānau, our Pacifica whānau, our other people across New Zealand that for various reasons are doing it very tough at the moment. And we have worked out that we really need a better way to pay for this stuff. So this is something that I'm personally very, very passionate about, as we do need a range of finance solutions for people across New Zealand. At the moment, we have things like Warmer Kiwi Homes, and we have mortgage-tied bank loans, which work for some, but not all New Zealanders. How do we do long-term loans? How do we include renters? How do we activate subsidies? How do we make sure pensioners like my mum, who will save thousands of dollars a year but don't have a mortgage, how can she afford solar and to get gas out of her home when ultimately that requires a massive upfront injection of capital and she no longer has a mortgage? So this is the very kind of thing that we're trying to solve at the moment. And also our intergenerational whānau, specifically in areas where they might have home ownership, but they don't have a lot of income necessarily and cannot go get mortgages for that reason. So these are all the New Zealanders that we're trying to figure out how to solve, when this is New Zealand's very wicked problem of making sure everyone now has access to the cheapest energy in human history. And so one of the things that we're working on, and there are a few other things I'm going to mention, that we are doing a solar for renters program. And we are looking at really trying to work with the government to extend Warmer Kiwi Homes to include solar on the roofs, batteries in the garage from a resilience perspective. But we are also working with them to try and extend Warmer Kiwi Homes to include rental properties, because we think that is a massive thing. But there is also this thing on the horizon at the moment that, Esther, I'm sure you would have heard of from local government, called the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme. The thing that we're very focused on within this scheme is a thing called energy affordability loans. And what this means is that the council essentially will be able to provide finance to a home in order for them to do the energy upgrades in their home that will ultimately save them money from day one. And so the way that I can explain this to you now is that if you use the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme to put solar panels on your roof, you will be paying back every quarter at an interest rate of lower than a mortgage interest rate of about 4%. You'll pay back the interest and the capital, and you'll still save about $3 a day immediately by doing that. So about getting close to $1,000 a year, or just over $1,000 a year, is a massive amount of money for a lot of people in New Zealand. It's $1,000 pay rise for every household that goes ahead and does that. So very, very exciting. This is another way of looking at this at the moment, is a 9-kilowatt array put on a rooftop of New Zealand over how long we expect to last, solar panels to last for, which is about 25 years. It will return $25,000 of additional money to the whānau, even after the payments to the interest and the capital has been done. So that is a really remarkable saving. So not only do the solar panels pay themselves off, but they also give people $25,000 over 25 years, which is just huge for a lot of whānau in New Zealand. How it works really simply is a home can go on, they can upgrade their They can look at the upgrades that they want to do to their home, probably on a website handled by the New Zealand government, something like ICA. Through approved tradies, they will get a variety of quotes. The customer will choose the quote. It will come and be installed by an approved tradie. The RAS, or the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme, pays the tradie, and then the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme, the customer pays back the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme on a much longer term, say 15 to 25 years, at a much, much lower interest rate. We have a number of councils, including Queenstown Lake District Council. So thank you for voting on that, Esther, to be a part of this so far. They have invested money into this. I think it's a really good way of councils being empowered to actually help their ratepayers to lower their bills and lower emissions all at the same time, which is super exciting. And we're just trying to get more and more councils signed up, not now with financial commitments, because all the financial investment in this has been done, but just really the support for the kaupapa to convince the government to change the legislation that makes this a good idea. But yeah, we need some central government legislation. We need more council endorsement, and then basically we've got to get ICA to help develop this and get this off the ground. But I mean, I don't say this lightly. I think if we can achieve this outcome of low interest finance to whānau to electrify and lower their energy bills, this could be the single biggest piece of economic reform in a generation. Like, it is so significant, the amount of money that we can save people if we can get people access to the technology, which means getting them access to finance. What does finance do? It relieves the upfront capital burden by allowing you to pay for the stuff over a much longer period of time, and repaying the stuff over a much longer period of time is already cheaper than what your current energy bills are. And that's what makes this a super exciting process. So I'm going to finish off very quickly. What is Rewiring's kaupapa? It is to make sure that every New Zealander electrifies everything. And Esther, once you've finished electrifying everything, I want you to electrify everyone. So I now have a fully electric dad. My mum is nearly a fully electric mum, and I have fully electric in-laws. I have fully electric uncles and aunties. When I look out my window there, I see solar installations. I can see 7 separate solar installations that have come as a direct result of me installing solar on my roof and talking about it. Those of you that are listening who have solar, you are the most annoying New Zealanders imaginable, because all you want to do at the barbecue is talk to everybody else about how much money you're saving. And this is the network effect that we are after. We are building a ground up movement. We've spent too long asking politicians to solve our energy system and got nowhere. We needed to be asking communities to do this all along. We've spent too long asking economists and accountants to solve the climate crisis, and it seems to have resulted in more pine trees and more fossil fuels. What we need to be doing is asking electricians and tradies to activate and to do this properly. So electrify everything and electrify everyone. Whakahiko te ao. Let's electrify our country. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, tēnā koe, Mike. Thank you for that impassioned speech. I'm actually just looking at my app right now for my solar, and it's looking pretty good. So I'm fully electric. I've electrified everyone I know. My whānau is as well. So huge advocate of your work.
Thank you.
And I think, you know, there's a lot to kind of digest from that. You gave us a kind of overview of everything. So you certainly built the case for electrification. You talked about the problem of fossil fuels and the number of machines that we're actually trying to electrify. And I think that's one of the great things that I love about Rewiring Aotearoa, is that you've created a really simple form of education and advocacy that has enabled people to get behind you. I would also like to shout out to, I think, local government, because they have not only advocated and endorsed, but also been part of the movement, and also philanthropy, because many philanthropists, as we know, are already directly investing. So ECCT, which is East Coast and Central Trust, they have actually funded 20 marae directly with solar, for example. So, you know, we are all in this together, and lots of people are already doing really great mahi. For me, I guess, you know, just as an example of one person in our district, I went for solar, I went for hot water heat pump enabled heat system. So I think when people think about the big issues, one thing that I just want to draw on is when we talk about a just transition, or in our case, we talk about a TICA transition. I just wanted to kind of tease that out a little bit because people watching may not quite understand that. So I'm going to be overly explicit, and that's not, it might sound a bit glib, but we are living through a transitional period. And when we use words in climate jargon, it detaches us from the issues hugely. So what does a just transition mean? Well, we're living in a time of transition. If we don't invest in solutions, people are going to be left behind. So we know this to be true. We know that those who are most marginalized, if we think about a different transition like a digital transition, we can easily name those people that have been left behind in the digital transition, like the elderly are often left behind because they can't use the tech, the digital tech that everybody requires us to, like banks, etc. So I think being explicit about those that are marginalized can kind of help us go, okay, if we're living through this transition, what does that look like for those that are marginalized? So you touched on it. Can you just explain a little bit more perhaps about a TICA transition? And you mentioned Mariah and Iwi and Hapu. Is there anything else that you can kind of talk to of the barriers and the opportunities around that, and perhaps what we could do more of in philanthropy or in local government or as individuals?
Kapai. So the biggest issue, and this is not just our most marginalized, but also what's stopping a lot of the middle class of New Zealand, is the upfront capital cost associated with electric technology usually being higher. And also one of the biggest issues that we are facing is decisions under duress. So when your hot water system, gas hot water system breaks, you don't care about the long-term price necessarily. You need to make sure that your whānau has a warm shower the following day. And so it becomes a situation where people are making decisions that are the cheapest options, that are the quickest options, but ultimately are by far the most expensive options. So cheapest in terms of upfront sticker price, but far, far more expensive when it comes to like long-term living costs. And so this is what we need to figure out how to solve, and why I'm so big on finance in particular and accessibility to finance, because when you pay your power bill or your gas bill, you're essentially paying a monthly bill. And that's essentially to an energy landlord when you think about it. Like that money just goes and continues to go every month in perpetuity. And the problem in New Zealand is that those bills keep going up at quite alarming rates. When you buy solar panels and put them on your roof, as just an example, you lock in the price of power for the next 25 years at 13 cents a kilowatt hour. It is such an economic slam dunk. But the problem is it's probably going to cost you $20,000 to put those solar panels on your rooftop. And so what we need to do is make sure that rather than having to pay $20,000 up front, that every New Zealander can choose to pay that back over a longer period of time, just like a power bill. And when we do that, we can make the power bill incredibly, like much, much cheaper. The problem with finance in New Zealand at the moment is that it is just impossible for so many New Zealanders to get access. You have to have a mortgage. You have to own a home. And so that is one of the big critical things that we're looking at trying to achieve. But the other thing is that mortgages ultimately are income contingent loans. You have to have an income proven to the bank in order to be able to pay that off, which kind of eliminates all pensioners. And what we're looking with the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme is one of the examples is what we call a property contingent loan, where it goes on the value of the property and ultimately allows you to pay it back over time through the savings that you get by making this wise decision. And so that's part of it. But the other part of this is also, and this is where I get really excited about the communities and partnering with iwi, is so much of this is education and narrative for our fellow New Zealanders. It's making them realize that the cheapest option day one is the most expensive option long term. And when they realize that, you can almost see, like when we go to these community events, they just click. All of a sudden they click and they're like, oh, wow, right, I can save money tomorrow by financing this rather than paying continuing to pay for the gas, hot water, or, so to speak. So that is really, really powerful, but we have to get that message out to all New Zealanders, and that's something that can be quite challenging. Yeah.
And I think,
sorry, can I just interrupt? I think just a third prong to that, which would be good to mention, is around solar for renters, which we're looking into, because everything that we're talking about at the moment is for those that actually have an asset or outright or have a mortgage, but just what we're working on with solar for renters.
Yeah.
Great.
So do you want to run into that now, Esther?
Yeah, not in too much depth, maybe just a very high level, because
very simple.
time is ticking.
There's not a lot of trust between the landlord and the tenants. And so in the same way, there is a mechanism where a bond is paid by the tenants that is not held by the landlord and is ultimately refunded back to them at the end. That kind of trusted system needs to sit between the tenant and the landlord when it comes to solar on the roof as well. So ultimately, there is a way that you can save a tenant a huge amount of money and make a landlord more money by putting solar on the roof. And that's because a tenant would be paying 35 cents. It's probably 13 cents when you finance on your mortgage. So how can we get a tenant paying 20 cents, which ultimately makes the landlord some money, but also saves the tenant a huge amount of money? And that is something that we're working on very closely, is kind of building that entity up that the tenant in particular will be able to trust, but also give the tenant a lot of agency so that they can go to the landlord and be like, I want to put solar panels on my roof, please. Here's how this is going to work. You don't have to pay anything, but I'm going to pay for it over time through my savings, and you're at the end of the day going to get a free solar system. And the next tenant that moves in is going to want to take this offer up, because otherwise they'll be paying 35 cents from the grid when they'll be buying it from 20 cents from this trusted entity. So that's kind of the way that we're wanting it to work. It's in very, very early stages at the moment of development, and we're starting to socialize it. Yeah.
As you say, it's marginalized to kind of homeowners, people with assets, people who are already middle class. So I think you've really outlined that very well for this particular kōrero. We're probably going to wrap up now. So let's just kind of think about what I want to establish at a high level is, are you guys like an education and advocacy organization? Is that how you would describe yourselves?
We call ourselves Think Do Tank, which is kind of like from a climate perspective, New Zealand has not really good narrative around how to particularly do this in New Zealand. So we import a lot of narrative from overseas that isn't necessarily that applicable to New Zealand. And so half of the research that we did last year was around creating the narrative and the economic justification for going hard on climate now. So that's the first thing, that's the thinking, but we like to say that we've largely done the thinking now, and 2025 is more about the doing, which is getting the legislation done in local government. So I've been called the most effective lobbyist in Wellington, which I don't know if I like that term or not, but I'm here and we're doing that, and that's quite cool. That's going to all politicians across both sides of the house and making them realize that there is just an absolute economic slam dunk on the table for New Zealanders, and here's the things that they need to be doing. One of my favorite sayings is almost, you put a soccer ball in front of an open goal and you ask the politician to kick it in. That is what we're trying to do here with climate and economic justification or transition in New Zealand. The other part of this is the doing, and that is really now, how do we empower communities? How do we get all these trials up and running? How do we do all the on-the-ground stuff that we can point to when every time some old bloke on Facebook goes, nah, that can't be done, we can point to an exact opportunity of it being done. And we can say, no, it is being done and it has been effective and it does work. That's what my cherry farm has done. That's what your home, Esther, is proving. That's what we need to be happening all over the country. One of my big things I would love to do is more of this up in, say, Northland and Auckland, and really now do the doing in the low-income community, marginalised community space as well, because we can't half-solve climate change. We have to fully solve climate change, and that means every New Zealander has to be a part of this transition. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And Bryony, did you want to close with any comments at all?
I just wanted to say a huge ngā mihi nui to the Kaupapa of National Significance, because one thing that was really excited about working with the Kaupapa of National Significance was the acknowledgement of the national mahi that we do, because a lot which is out there, I think from hearing Mike talk and the kōrero that we've had, it's very easy to see that everything's interwoven, and what we're wanting to do is create that throughout the motu. So it's been just fantastic to be able to have some funding that's there for our small but incredibly productive team, and so the mahi they can do to support communities to electrify everyone in Aotearoa. So I just want to say that it's been great. We've been able to get more people on board, like with Matt Newman, and really have that growth within the community space. And as we said, and was when we were working through this with the Kaupapa of National Significance, was that we're not out there doing for these communities. We completely acknowledge that they are there to find their own journey and navigate their own way. We just want to give them the tools and the resources, and as Mike said, just have that slam dunk to make it as easy as possible. So just thank you for just being there for all the national mahi that we're doing.
Oh, thank you. And
to talk
so
about that, like, to talk about that, like 100%, like the Kaupapa of National Significant funding has just supercharged our community action, which is just awesome. And I think the one other thing that I would add is anyone who is watching this that is interested, maybe you saw your community on our list of communities so far and you could join in, jump in and help out. That would be absolutely amazing. Maybe you didn't see your town on our community list, and you can reach out to us to figure out how we can start electrifying your town or your rohi. Would be awesome as well. So we've got 31, we want 100. We've got some, probably a handful that are really mature. We want to get them all to a level where they're just absolutely cranking. So that's the next part of this kaupapa now, is supporting them and becoming their own, I think really their own charitable entities that can take this to the next level and runs, completely self-sufficiently in the long run. That's the kind of long-term goal.
Oh, well, kia ora korua. I just want to also, I guess, finish with thanking the community trusts in particular. So the community trusts of New Zealand, there's 12 of them, and they have actually built the Kaupapa of National Significance through Climate Action Aotearoa, which myself and Arahanui lead. And that has given $1.5 million to Kaupapa of National Significance to climate action in the last 2 years. So your organisation has been one recipient of that. But thank you very much, both of you, for your mahi. Thanks for your massive explainer today. That's been really educational.
Sorry, it's probably longer
helpful
than you wanted, but I just can't help myself.
It's okay. It was going to be 15 minutes, but I'll rewrite that timing for people so they know to give themselves a bit more time to listen to it. It's really worthwhile. So thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you so much, Esther. Ngā mihi nui, and ka kite anō.
Ka kite anō.
Ka kite. Thank you. Kia ora.